Good evening. I would like to call the March 5th, 2019 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can we all please stand for the pledge?
I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So, I do not have any announcements at this point in time. Is there anyone here for anything that is not currently printed on our agenda? Seeing as none, I'm going to move directly into item number 1, which is the Isabella Drive discussion with Land Council and possible votes. Do we have Land Council here? Jay, come on up.
Morning. Good morning. Good evening.
Good
evening. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
All right.
We're boning as it's morning, the rest of us.
That's right. Good evening, Jay Tallerman. Nice to be here.
How are you, Jay?
I'm doing well.
So, you want to talk to us about Isabella Drive?
Well, I'm happy to answer any questions. As I understand it, Bill gave me some of the background in terms of the subdivision plans and where we're going, or where it's been, the status of it vis-a-vis the homeowners association, some of the conditions of the road. I have some cost estimates on work. I've reviewed your local bylaws and your local procedures for roadway acceptance and for doing work on private ways. So I'm familiar with all the background. I'm not sure what's in front of you per se is saving the request by the landowner that this road kind of veer towards more of a public way, or that the town oversee its and bear the expense for the finalization of all the road repairs and construction and then the continued and future maintenance.
So, is it the original developer? Are they out of business, out of money?
They were foreclosed upon.
They were foreclosed upon.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much blood out of that stone at this point, and that is not atypical. You know, with these small developments, someone builds a couple of the lots, cashes out, they're gone, and that appears to be the case here. Unfortunate. All the towns I represent deal with this at one time or another, and we have bylaws and procedures and conditions that protect us to the best of our ability, and sometimes they yield some okay results, and sometimes we have to chase down people as best we can. Sometimes it's also just a private issue.
So what cost-wise would we, Bill, do you want to?
So I have, and I don't know if Bill wants to get up, Bill forwarded me today. You're fortunate that he has the ability through his kind of engineering expertise to put these things together. I think it's $75,000, give or take, to finish this road necessarily, and then obviously continuing maintenance obligations. The road itself is not fully up to your standards. It was constructed with an eye towards being substandard because it only serves 3 lots, so why make people develop it the same way you would with a 40-lot subdivision? The trade-off when that happens, and this is very typical, is that, okay, this is just a little road, we're going to give you some waivers, but, by the way, you own it.
Yeah.
And that appears to have been what happened here. There was a significant amount of waivers. It's what, about 18 feet wide, Bill?
It is 18.
It's not impassable. It's just, it's not in finished shape, and it's probably going to deteriorate a little bit. But along with the planning board decision, which contemplated that this road would remain private, there's a homeowners association, which everyone had notice of, that each one of the homeowners or the association itself bore the ultimate responsibility for these things. That's not to say that you wouldn't or shouldn't have any empathy or sympathy for anyone who lives on a road where a developer flies the coop, which happens here. It's something that boards of selectmen wrestle with, because ultimately you guys are going to control the purse strings or make recommendations along those lines vis-a-vis roadway acceptance. You also have another avenue in this town that a lot of towns haven't availed themselves of, but there's a few Central Mass and Blackstone Valley towns that have availed themselves of the ability to create a bylaw through a specific section of the general laws that allows you on private roads to do work. It's a kind of very unique provision. And then you would assess a betterment to the property owners, and that's right in your bylaws. There would have to be a specific petition to the selectmen, and then you would have to go about and pay for it. So roughly, again, go to town meeting for $75,000, and then assess a betterment for all of the work. And the problem with that in this context is it would probably be more expensive for this property owner than if they did the work themselves. You're talking about a $25,000 betterment for 3 lots. And by the way, $25,000 of it you'd probably never be able to collect. You'd end up foreclosing on that lot unless it's purchased by someone else. But you'd be burdening all 3 lots with a $25,000 betterment, essentially. And you have the right to do that. You would have the right to do that even without this statute, but this statute is specific. So the other element to this, too, is before a roadway becomes public, it's traditional in this town, and it's basic policies that the planning board says this roadway is ready to be made public. The standard, the precedent that this town sets and most towns set is it should be ready, so that when you turn key and you own the road, you don't have to then reach into your pocket and do a bunch of work. There are exceptions to that, and there are public policies, and ultimately it's up to you and perhaps town meeting.
So the planning board proposed not accepting the road, correct?
It was never presented to be accepted as a public way. The planning board has worked, and attorneys here as well, but the planning board has approved this project with the full intention of it remaining a private way in perpetuity, which is why they granted all the waivers, and which is why they had the homeowners association. Those things were thought about during the permitting process for the subdivision.
And what is the extent of the work that needs, I'm sorry, I don't have anything to look at. What's the extent of the work that needs to be done, which brought
The
this?
remaining work largely is finishing the top coat of paving. That's the bulk of it. As part of my estimate, I was very conservative in my number. Obviously, my number includes prevailing wage rates, and it's not only the material cost, but it's the installed cost. So it's a lot higher than, as Jay indicated, than an individual, it would cost a developer, say, to do. I overestimated my loam calculations because I assumed all of it was not loamed and seeded, and so there's a lot of conservativeness built into my number. We've been trying to reach out to the party that foreclosed on the project, the lender, and for years, and we get nowhere. We don't get our call back. We've sent certified letters, they get returned unopened. It's difficult to get blood from a stone.
No, agreed.
Couple questions. Is that a private lender or a bank?
It's a private lender.
And as you envisioned it, when you came up with your numbers, what would the finished width of the roadway be?
18 feet.
So which is still under our standard.
It is.
Yeah.
I was just going to say,
By
follow up, what's
design.
the standard for a roadway?
24 feet.
Thank you.
And Ernie, on the highway side, are we currently doing any snow removal up there, or is that the homeowners association that takes care of that?
Now, you do have the authority, so snow removal is a little different than maintenance. If you do maintenance on a private way, you own that maintenance. So if you start patching holes, then you have to keep patching those same holes. Snow removal is different. You could essentially go onto any property in town, or not property, but any roadway in town and remove snow if you wanted, and then you could stop. So I'm not suggesting that you do that or don't do that, but again, not atypical for towns to, while people are struggling through the roadway acceptance thing, or if there's an old private way to do some snowplow. I think that it can be a, no pun intended, slippery slope when you start doing that, because we all know we're running snow and ice deficits every year, and it's only going to put you further behind on those things. But you should you're allowed to put that in a separate bucket to the extent that you or DPW ever wanted to go down that road.
So, I mean, just so I can kind of level set, so this was originally built, we gave them waivers with the assumption from day one of the subdivision being built, which I'm assuming you've got original residents that were part of the first homes in there, understanding this was never to be a public road.
Right. That's the agreement we came to. Also, I mean, there are several of these over the years that we've approved in town. And if we start doing one, we're gonna be doing all of them. It was set up so that that wouldn't happen. The town's not supposed to be plowing and sanding them and maintaining them because they're an association.
So if we were to go through, just thinking out loud, like if we were to go through and do the paving on that, we would then be able to assess a betterment, and we would forfeit our liability of any further maintenance on that. If we just said, look, we'll do the paving, but we're going to assess a betterment on it, and the road's still going to remain a private way. Do we have an out in that avenue?
I think it's more likely, I'd have to take a look at your bylaw again. The way the bylaw is structured is kind of in a way to assess the betterment and then to get it to the point where you would accept it and then do that work. I could look at it to see if there's a potential plan B where you would assess the betterment and then, look, this was our gift to you, now it's on you.
Because I think the only way I would be comfortable accepting the road is to bring it to our standard width.
That's going to be my next question for Bill. I mean, would that involve land takings and things like that? We're at 18 feet wide now. If we wanted to get that extra 6 feet, how involved a process is that?
It becomes much more involved. You're adding on to an existing structure. The box, the gravel below the paving would have to be widened. That would affect the drainage system that's on either side of the road. So things would change significantly and the cost would just go up from there.
I think it would be an easier pill for me to swallow, accepting the road as if it were to our standard. If it was
Well,
the extra 6
I have a
feet.
difficult
The
time.
other option would be, of course, not accepting it at the 24 feet of width. Obviously, the fire chief would have heard he said 18 is okay if you're serving just 3 lots, because, I mean, they check in on all these things, as the planning board takes emergency access really seriously as well. I think that just getting it up at 18 feet to your standard could be something you may look at it too. Again, there's a cost to that, and Bill's given a conservative estimate here. But, you know, a betterment is a difficult item here, obviously, because we got 3 property owners that would have to bear it 100%. But before you do that, your town meeting would have to come up with that money to begin with. That's how the betterment process works. And then you could fill in the blanks after that, and then after that, you could move to accept it once it's all done. So it could be a multi-step. Alternatively, you could spread the cost around and just put it in the highway budget, and so all the taxpayers would be paying. And there's a number of ways to pay for road repairs. You get
Chapter 90.
Well, Chapter 90 money, I'm not sure if would be appropriate for this road, but the budget itself that you give to highway could potentially cover it, or it could be beefed up. But that way, the cost is spread across the taxpayers. The question is then you want to start spreading to Ernie's point, spreading that cost across the taxpayers with every private road in town, which isn't to say that it's a precedent-setting event. It's not. You would take each property in its own rights. For example, and I've represented some towns that have taken a periodic inventory of their private ways, and those where the fire department may have some real concern over old private ways of help getting an ambulance down, they've prioritized putting municipal dollars into those and making them public. So you may want to, if you want to go that route at all, is take a look at your current inventory out there and say, okay, we're not against this in concept, but is this the one? And I don't know or don't know, I haven't seen it. There may be other roadways, in fact, I'm going to posit that there likely are other private roadways that are probably in worse shape than this. which, again, you could fix them all. I mean, you could do anything with money. So,
Private
if
way
you
that's
had it,
newsworthy.
that's right, yeah,
I mean, wave my hand.
that's right.
What, forget, this is being driven by the 3 households on Isabel Drive?
No.
Well, there's 3 lots in the project.
Yeah.
Okay, so the homeowners association applies to 3 different owners. The lender owns one of the 3 lots, so there's 2 houses out there. The way the planning board structured the decision, as well as the surety for the project, at the request of the developer, was that they would withhold issuance of a building permit on the 3rd lot, grant the other 2, then the project would be 100% complete, they would release the 3rd lot.
Never get to that 100%.
Didn't work out that way.
Correct. So now, in terms of numbers, as Jay indicated, my conservative estimate came out around, what, 75,000. And again, I want to say that that's high, particularly if a private developer does it. I asked Beth what the assessed value or the appraised value for the lot is. She said around 90. So there is adequate funding there to recoup if you acquire that lot.
In other words, it's still possible that, who knows, the local developer may say, hey, here's a leftover lot. It may happen at some point, as these things, and I don't know if anyone's actively marketing or not, but if they could get this property from the bank or the lender for whatever it may be worth, and pay the $70,000 or work with the other 2 property owners to bring it up to speed, then they might find their way to a public way. Who knows? Or at least get the roadway in better shape on a private basis.
How old is the development?
2006, I think.
Yeah, 2006 is the approval.
Do we have an idea on the existing street itself as to whether it's?
Oh, we've done all the testing on the binder course of paving and the gravel below it. We've inspected all of it, yes. It's built properly up to that point.
I don't know. I would defer it to you 2 gentlemen. I'm of the mindset of not accepting the road.
I'm really leery of accepting a road that doesn't meet, the 24-foot standard, the regular standard. It serves 2 lots or 3 lots now, depending on how you look at it. But I don't want to put a problem off until tomorrow or far down the road in the future if it was ever meant to serve anything else or we ever had to build upon what we had. It doesn't sound like that's going to be economically feasible to make it conform to a regular roadway with 2 12-foot lanes.
The bank bill, just to round out, the bank is paying the taxes, so it's not
They're
in
current
tax.
on their taxes. They
So-
own both the right-of-way as well as that 3rd lot.
So sometimes in some of these instances, what we do is we might approach a bank and say, hey, we've got this lot here, it's an issue. There is a potential way where you could say, you now own the problem of this roadway. We want you to fix it. Again, a bank may look at it and say, well, I've got a $90,000 asset and $70,000 in work to do. You take the lot, just have it. I don't know what they would say, but there is some recourse there to at least push those buttons. I mean, it is still a requirement of the permit that the developer or his successor complete this road.
I would probably advise that those buttons get pushed before if that fails, maybe we address it again, but at this point, I'm not trying to be rude or sound callous or that I'm not empathetic to the property owner, so I'm just not of the mindset of accepting the road, knowing that it was built and developed and people purchased it with that understanding in mind. I am sorry that the developer went under, but my vote's no.
I mean, I think we should do what we can to contact the bank and try to put some pressure on them.
Has there been correspondence to the bank or?
We haven't corresponded with the bank, but we have been sending correspondence to the owner, and he doesn't respond to any of our correspondence.
Emerald Funding currently owns the property, and we've reached out repeatedly to Emerald Funding.
I think we need to keep in mind, having said that, that whatever we do does not get us to what I consider to be the root of the problem, which is, even if the road's constructed properly and paved, it's still not to the standard I think that we would all like.
Right, at that point, it would be up to the homeowners to take care of it on an annual basis and still do their plowing and fixing their potholes. They might have a roadway that'll be a little more durable because it would have the finished course and whatever else it needs to, so it might stand up to some wear and tear, but.
Is it just running binder, Ernie?
I'm sorry?
Is it just binder on
It's
it?
just binder. I mean, the road's holding, the binder is holding up.
Hey, could I say something?
Sure.
I had it looked at last week. There are large cracks in the road, and Precision Pavement said that this is long overdue. It's starting to pebble, all the rocks are coming out of the binder. It's not in good shape, and every year we wait, it's gonna be more costly to whoever steps up, and honestly, as a homeowner, we have absolutely no rights to the road, okay? The town and the road is associated with Lot 3. And even if we wanted to do something, we couldn't. The town has the no-bill covenant. They could actually seize the lot and start, the bottom line is that road is gonna last. And then there's gonna be a lot more money involved in this. And could I say one other thing?
Sure.
There's a road right across from us, I forgot the name. I think it's Stagecoach, but that road is 22 feet wide. And that road doesn't even have a cul-de-sac. So when they plow that, they gotta do a 3-point turn. We have a cul-de-sac that can easily support the plow truck.
I think it's important to note, and it is certainly not a debate with the property owner, and again, I have some empathy for him, is that as I read the homeowner's trust, as of October in 2018, the lot owners have the right to take over the homeowner's trust, which is responsible for maintenance of the roadway.
So the property owners could actually pool together and have the road paved if they so chose?
Again, I've been charged with interpreting their legal rights, but I've seen enough of these to know that there's successor-type provisions, and it's right there on page, in Article 3, Section 1, after 7 years from the sale of the first lot. So it might not actually be 7 years yet. I don't know when that first lot was sold, but it was at some point after 2011. So they're rapidly, at the very least, rapidly approaching the point at which they could assume all the control over that.
So in current state, as our land council, if it's a private way, the town really doesn't have a dog in this fight. If the property owners chose to go and pave the road and they wanted to have it bright fuchsia, we have absolutely nothing to say about that. It's not one of our roads.
The legal term is no dog in this fight. I mean, more or less. Again, without being flip about it, it is, again, towns do sometimes, and you took the fairly extraordinary step of developing a bylaw so that in exigent circumstances, you could swoop in and finish a roadway that was causing a problem to your police, to commuters, or whatever. You have that right, and then to impose a betterment. I would suggest here that it's probably not meeting that standard, because there doesn't seem like there's any exigent circumstances. It's not a through road. The roadway's in tough shape, but it's not dire. But also, if you imposed a betterment here, I'm not sure that if I'm one of the two property owners, I'd be particularly thrilled with that, because they'd be coming up with an extra payment every year. For as long as
$75,000, it's a hefty one.
They can do it less expensively, separate from us intervening.
right, because they wouldn't be
that's the point.
subject to prevailing wage. That's a big driver of
But
these fees.
as it sits right now, it poses no threat to any emergency-based vehicles to come in or out of the property itself, and it's causing nothing to any intersection area that would be a town road, making itself a nuisance.
And I don't want to speak for the fire department. I take on, Ernie's been at this for a little while, and the roadway, not in great shape, but passable. And
Very adequate. It's in much better shape than a lot of our other roads are.
I've worked with this planning board for a while, and we've reviewed some roads that are in some pretty tough shape, where we've denied allowing building lots on them because the fire chief expresses some concern. And I don't think this road meets some of those horror stories that we've had in the
No,
past.
it doesn't,
No.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's not newsworthy like Perry Street, correct?
In much better shape than Perry Street.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Council a question?
Absolutely.
Do we have any obligation to notify potential buyers when they get involved in subdivisions like this?
No.
If there's a homeowners association in existence, or that the road is private, do we have to post a sign? Is there any duty on the part of the town?
No. So the subdivision process, you would think that because there's an overlay of some kind of process to create the lots, the subdivision process is for the express purpose of creating recordable title. It doesn't create an obligation of oversight or responsibility. So it's just a mechanism so that property owners who want to divide their property have a governmental approval to do that so they can then go to the registry. It does not then shift any liability or responsibility onto the municipality.
Okay.
So the third lot is the important lot here, in the sense that
Could be the White Knight.
could be the White Knight. So could we charge you and planning or Bill to connect with the third lot owners, which is, I think, a bank, and see if they're interested in playing ball?
Yeah, I think maybe, I'm going to be with the planning board next week, so if you maybe add that to the agenda, we'll talk about it briefly, and then maybe a letter on my letterhead might stir some action there, and we'll see what happens. And who knows, maybe by just us talking about it, then, it becomes a topic of discussion, and somebody may make them an offer. Who knows?
Good with that?
I'm all right with that.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. Maybe we can find a solution just by,
Yeah, we'll put a little pressure on them. It sometimes works. Sometimes you see them wake up. I mean, they're going to be carrying the taxes forever. I think it's probably in their best interest to do something here.
yeah, even at,
They might be waiting out the clock, though, too, for those 7 years, so they're no longer responsible. But ultimately, their asset is decreasing in value as the road decreases in quality.
what are we getting in taxes every year?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know what the
So
rate is.
buildable
It's
lot,
valued
yeah.
at 95,000, so whatever that gets you.
Plus the road.
Yes.
Could I just bring up one point? In the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land, the Mass, September 17th, 1975, page B-5.B, approval with a covenant states that no lot may be built upon or sold until all improvements required in these regulations have been completed and approved as provided hereafter. The board determines to its satisfaction that such improvements specified in section 5 have been completed so as to adequately serve such lots and lots. Section 5 talks all about the road, and there's flooding in front of our property because the road wasn't given properly. Okay, there's never been an as-built. Okay, so this speaks of knowledge of, of the road and the environment pertaining to the road prior to allowing those lots to be sold.
So my understanding, as this was explained to me, is that the agreements that were made upon between the developer and the planning commission was we held Lot 3 in reserve. They needed to get lots 1 and 2 to spec, along with an approved, what we deemed an
To serve the
acceptable
lots.
roadway,
Right.
with the waivers in mind that they had already applied for.
Correct.
Those 2 homes and lots and roadway were at that point in time satisfactory for us to release Lot 3, and he then went into foreclosure.
The way it normally works, Mr. Chairman, is the planning board requires the road be built to a certain standard, then they will release lots in return for surety to make sure the project gets finished. In this case, the standard was binder course of paving, as is the case with all projects. After that was achieved, they released lots 1 and 2 and held Lot 3 as a surety to make sure the project got finished. And as my numbers support, is there's enough money there to justify finishing the project in order to recoup your money. So this is, in my opinion, compliant with what Mr. Dumas just read. So I think we have adequate surety. We have a safe access to the lots that were released. And with regard to the ponding, I know grades around that area have changed. We don't have as-builts, that they never submitted as-builts for the binder paving. We inspected visually the construction techniques and standards, and it appeared to meet the requirements.
And I guess, pardon me for my bluntness on this, but the long story short is the developer had started going down the road of doing what they had said that they were going to do.
Yes,
We were holding Lot 3 in surety.
yes,
They then went under.
yes,
Things never got finished.
yes.
I don't see where that falls on the town's responsibility.
It isn't. I mean, might it be, and don't forget, at the time when this was happening, we have faced at every downturn in the economy, in the real estate economy, subdivisions going belly up everywhere. I mean, I'm chasing in half a dozen towns unfinished subdivisions at any given point in time where we're catching a trough in the real estate economy. Best laid plans. So, okay, so let's say we didn't do the lot and we did money instead. Well, at a certain point, if they make enough money, they take the money, and then we are stuck being contractors. So there's never really a perfect solution. You try and work with local developers who are seemingly trustworthy, but economic situations happen, and sometimes the best laid plans just doesn't work. Subdivision security, no matter what it is, and Bill and I have this discussion all the time, is never perfect. Chasing a developer who walks off of a project, whether it's financial security, building permits, or the lot itself, is always something that municipalities are somewhat ill-equipped to do.
All we can really do is the best reasonable effort, and I think
You
that's
do the
what
best
we've
you
done.
can. You try and work with people. You know how tight your budget is, because I'm sure you're starting to, in earnest, look at your budget for the annual town meeting, and I'm sure it's a horror show. Every town trying to come up with the money to do everything.
It causes us quite a bit of angst.
Yes, I can imagine it does.
Like I said, I mean, I'm perfectly okay with asking him to draft a letter on his letterhead, try and rattle the cage of the developer, and see if that may wake him up. Or at least the bank, and wake them up to try and help. But, you know, as much as I empathize with your situation, I just don't see it feasible for the town to accept your road. And, I mean, that's where I sit with it. If the other two gentlemen to my left and right have a different thought process or demeanor on it, they're more than welcome to express that.
No, I agree, and I think empowering our attorney to follow this up is a good strategy, at least for now.
Tim?
No, that's, I think, the town in mind, probably the prudent thing. I do know from time to time we will plow when it's deemed necessary, if that's something that we might want to look at deeper. No?
I don't see where it's the town's obligation to maintain they're set up in this way so that we don't have to maintain them. That's why we give them all the waivers.
The
And
big
like I
thing-
said, there's several of them in town. You start doing one, you're gonna have everybody in here banging on the desk saying, why aren't you doing mine next? And they were never set up to be done that way. They were never
I
set
hear
up for the town to maintain.
The big difference between this and, you know, the newer projects, let me put it that way, the newer projects that are private and intended to remain private, and older private ways, is that the current ones, we do notify the buyers through a homeowners association, so they should have that notice when they actually purchase the property. It should be in their packet.
Should be-
Part of their title.
Well, I know the only time that I ever see a town getting involved on a private way, like case in point Perry Street, is where it gets to the point where the road's not passable, and we can't get emergency vehicles down through there. Then we have to step in and at least do something.
I think the older projects or the private roads that we've been doing since I've been working at the highway department, we've always done them. The planning board, in creating newer private roads, is doing this type of mechanism so that they'll be built better, but they won't be a private road that the town will have to keep going in and maintaining. It's a new private road, but it's built to the standards of what roads should be built, rather than the old camp roads that we're maintaining and plowing and sanding now. I mean, like Jay said, there's a lot of roads that are in a lot worse shape than this one. And I don't think there's no reason for us to let these developments be built if we're gonna end up taking them over and having to maintain them. The whole mechanism is set up so that the landowner is allowed to use his land and build on it, but he knows he's got a private road, and it's gonna be his road to maintain and take care of, not ours.
Agreed. And I mean, it's also one of those that if that's the intent of the builder long-term, then they just get held to the standard of it looks just like all of our other public roads.
Correct.
And it's something that we can take over with ease of use.
Just maybe more narrow, but it's built to the standard of, as far as the surface, the construction of the road, it's just a smaller road because it's a private road.
Yep.
It's less for them to maintain, but they don't need a big wide road that we would normally ask for.
Fair enough. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, so moving on to item number 2. We have an appointment to the Capital Committee, Fitzpatrick, and possible vote.
Mr. Fitzpatrick could not be here tonight, but he has submitted an application. The committee does support his appointment, so if you choose, please appoint him to a term ending June 30th, 2021.
I would move that we appoint Mr. Fitzpatrick to a term ending June 30th, 2021.
Well, I would second that motion.
Motion was made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
The big one, approve health insurance agreement and possible votes.
Mr. Chairman, this agreement's been in your packet for, I think, a couple of meetings now. It bears the edits of town council, Richard Bowen, who's reviewed this document twice now. And the changes that he made have all been accepted by the other parties. The travel on this is we're starting to get into a compressed time frame. We need to have an agreement in place if this is the way we're going to go with health insurance, so we have time to do the enrollment of our employees before June 30th. And as you know, that requires disclosure of plan details and signing up on forms, and it's, it has to be during open enrollment. It's a little bit of work in the back office, a lot of work in the back office for the finance director and the treasurer of the town. So our hope is to have this signed, sealed, and delivered by the various entities within the next couple of weeks. On Thursday of this week, the insurance advisory committees of all of the towns that are contemplating joining this joint purchase group will have the opportunity to meet and quiz the lowest bidder for the book of business. So the collective bargaining units will participate in the interview of the carrier, the third-party administrator that's going to work this. So that's prospective. I would ask, though, that unless you have questions or objections to the agreement, that you approve it contingent upon the agreement of the town's non-union employees that have a representative on the Insurance Advisory Committee and its collective bargaining units. That way, we're still bargaining in good faith with our employees, but we have, the text that we're going to go forward with. If there's any edit from any of the other towns, it will have to come back before you. You can't just edit it on the fly. It has to come back to you. So I think there's plenty of safeguards
Bless
here.
you.
As I've mentioned, I think it bears repeating, and I repeat it every time I have a chance. Difference between rolling the business over with a fully insured product and going with the joint purchase group is going to be about $272,000 out of the operating budget of the municipal side of the town budget for the year. And the prospect of being able to have control of rate growth in the future is very attractive when compared to being at the mercy of the health insurance industry. So it is certainly our view that we will go forward as quickly as possible. By way of update, I've received correspondence indicating that the police union is ready for next steps on this. The fire union, through their contract, waived the right to bargain plan design. It is actually part of their agreement. They have been included anyway, so all of the material that's been sent out to educate employees has also been sent to the fire union. And we've met, at least, to discuss the topic with the Teamsters that represent cafeteria workers and custodians at the schools and the Douglas Teachers Association Executive Committee. Faculty meetings were scheduled for yesterday.
Oops.
We lost that due to the snow. But we're looking to reschedule that either for the 11th or the latest possible date would be the 18th. But in the meantime, it would help in our discussion with other participants that if we have a contingent approval of this agreement. The last update would be that there is another town. So on page 1, Article 2, participants. The founding participants are the towns of Douglas and Crossout Millbury, Crossout Southbridge. Add Stoughton and Webster and the Dudley Charlton Regional School District.
Stoughton?
So interestingly enough, they became aware. Now, I'm not speaking out of term, but time is marching on and I can't keep a secret forever. The town manager in Stoughton is a bit of a health insurance expert. She found out what we're doing with this joint purchase group. She has a large self-insured group because it's a fairly sizable town. And her group would add to our numbers and give us well over 1,500, 1,600 active employees and over 2,000, closer to 2,200 total covered lives. That's the sweet spot. That's where you need to be. Millbury declined to participate because they got a quote from Maya that was very favorable to them. Basically, Blue Cross through Maya has bought the business for a year. We all know the comeuppance will be the rate change in year 2. Yeah. But we certainly still have sufficient numbers. And all the towns and entities involved here have similar claims experience. So we're not picking up a weak partner just to get to the number. We're picking up a strong partner to get to the number.
I'm in favor of it.
Would you like any kind of summary? There's a couple of things I feel like I should make sure I put on the public record, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Have at it.
If the town enters this agreement, it must stay in the agreement for a minimum of 2 years. The initial cost to play, so to speak, is 1 month's working rate, which is claims plus padding to cover the claims. The proposal would be to fund that initial equity buy-in with the use of free cash that was certified. We're not passing that. We're trying to save money. We don't want to pass that on to this year's budget at all. After 2 years, you may leave and take what share of equity you have after the fund has been put together. The fund is what makes it self-insurance. That trust fund will pay the claims. The goal of this agreement is to grow the fund to be 8 to 10% of annual claims experience. After that, the entities participating in the group must take the funds out and use it to lower their annual contribution. So we're not going to grow a great big huge nest egg of taxpayer money. It will all go into the fund. It'll be used to pay claims. And then if it gets to an excess amount, it'll simply be used to reduce your budget every year, which has been the case in many other joint purchasing groups. This would be the first in Worcester County, but not the first in the Commonwealth. And then lastly, the governance. There will be a board of directors. Every town will have 1 member, and there are any number of voting procedures that will be used. All of the voting procedures that are in here regarding emergency voting and that kind of thing have all been stricken from the agreement because they are not compliant with Open Meetings Act. So basically, the thought is the group is subject to the Open Meetings Act. We would probably take a vote to allow remote participation if there's a quorum physically present in order to conduct business. But we really can't imagine any circumstance where an insurance fund would have an emergency requiring an instant decision. So that's all I had on it. Do you have any questions or concerns about it?
Well, it sounds like you've negotiated a good deal, Matt.
I think I might solve the healthcare crisis tonight here in Douglas, Mass. Why this works is because we're able to pool a bunch of lives together, right? Who's to say, why couldn't we sell additional spots that we could in turn go back to this group or to an insurer and say, we've got, X amount of employees plus we're bringing in 250 families that want to sign up.
I've never heard of a blended model with private lives coming into a municipal joint purchase. We're subject to 32B and the offer that we have to make, and I think that's what governs the way we go about this business. I don't know that we could make it.
Well, it's just the way.
I wish it was like electricity aggregation, right, where the town could use its influence working with other towns to negotiate a price for electricity and turn around and make that rate available to people.
Right.
That's such as the case in Douglas. I've never heard of that being done for health insurance. I would have to look into it to see if it's.
Maybe, I'm certainly not going to derail what we're doing here. I just wonder if we could take it that extra step in year 2 maybe, or year and 1.5, just to see. I'm sure there's probably a state law that says we can't or shouldn't do that.
I don't know. I mean, you also have to look at the rates too. I mean, like many people who have worked, I've always had coverage, whether it was in the private sector or public sector, through my employer. I've never had to go out and buy insurance. So I've been less than sensitive to the rates. I just don't know. I mean, this plan that we have now is $21,000 a year for a family.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money, and I don't know if that's what
I can
people
tell you
would
I
buy.
have to buy my health insurance through the Mass Health Connector. And I would love the opportunity to jump onto something like this.
All right,
And I'd
well-
be, I'd pay.
Yeah.
But this would give me an opportunity to, not me, but anyone, an opportunity to not go to Romney Care or whatever it is.
Okay. I'll look into it for you and get back next meeting.
We sell permits to allow people to go to Uxbridge to get rid of soil. We might as well look into healthcare.
Wow, you know how to stir it, huh?
Exactly.
Well, I wish you was here. I wish you was here.
Well done, well done.
Moving on. Do we hear anybody willing to throw a motion to approve this contingent upon what was predefined by Mr. Wojcik?
I would move that we approve this agreement contingent upon the employee unions in town and the non-union employees on the health insurance board.
Second.
All right. Motion was made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the matter? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, so we're on the third reading and approval of the personnel policy. Has there been any changes in the policy than what was previously read in?
We actually held this from the last meeting because there were some changes, and we wanted the full board to see it.
So should I hold?
So
Yeah.
it's a different makeup this time of board members from the last time, so I don't know whether you want to go ahead and
Well,
approve it
not
now,
completely
or-
different.
Not completely different, you're right.
I have no problems approving and moving past it. If you gentlemen are okay with it, or I can skip it over and we can try and catch a full board.
Well, I think Suzanne's point is valid, that I think all the board members have seen it now.
Yes.
Is that correct? I rescued you.
Thank you.
For 3 subsequent meetings. what happened with this is this languished. This was something that was written up and edited extensively by Attorney Mazur back in 2012, when the Town Administrator Act was passed and adopted. And it sat around for a long time before, and no action was taken on it. If you review it carefully, this is how we operate, though. I mean, the compensation chart and everything, this is it. Here, it's not the struck-out language, so really, in a way, to function with the proper legal authorization, we need this policy to be approved. Nothing is set in stone. I mean, if there's something in here that needs to change, we can bring it back to the board. But, when I navigate through it, it is, for the most part, fairly thorough. There's a couple of things missing here. We've got spots reserved on the warrant for town meeting to go over a couple of glitches in the bylaw that authorize these policies. But in general, this is a fairly detailed personnel policy, and it really gets down deep into the classification of positions and the drug screening and some of the other things that would be nice to have fully approved by the Board of Selectmen. So it is the policy of the town and not just a draft.
Is there anything preventing us from approving it this evening, Matt?
I don't think so.
Make a motion that we approve the personnel policy as it was presented in our packet tonight.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Website disclaimer and privacy policy, first reading.
It has come to our attention that we do not have a policy on our website. So we did look into what other towns have, came up with a policy before you. It was reviewed by town council, and it is the first of 3 readings.
I don't have to read it, do I? Yes, no, I don't have to read it out loud.
No, you don't have to read it out.
No.
You don't. You never do.
All right. So, let's go to item 6.
I threw this on here because you've talked about it in the past and haven't done it yet. So
Let's
I
just get her
figured
done.
Get it done.
Thank you. That is perfect. It is a discussion to disband the old grammar school disposition committee, which has been long since overdue because I don't even know if they even meet anymore.
No.
Because they don't want to, we know that.
Yes, they asked to be disbanded, please.
We should honor their request.
I would entertain such a motion.
I would move that we disband the old grammar school disposition committee.
Second that motion and thank them for their service.
Agreed. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, which brings us to item number 7. The pilot for Douglas Renewables LLC and possible votes.
So, Mr. Chairman, the planning board made a condition of site plan review, the negotiation of payment in lieu of taxes with the town. Town council, Mr. Bowen, provided us with a template, and the negotiation with Douglas Renewables was relatively quick and easy. They didn't have any stylistic or other textual or other text changes to make. The payment schedule in Exhibit B faithfully represents the conclusion, which is $7,500 per megawatt hour per year, with a 2.5% per year escalation factor. So by the time, the payment in year 1 would be $48,750. That will grow to $77,934 by year 20 of the agreement. The agreement doesn't take effect until the facility is built and is operating. And other than that, I think Mr. Bowen did a very fine job of having all the usual language in a pilot agreement. The inventory will be inspected after it's built, to say that it is the It is the development that was contemplated by the agreement. And the other taxes, the other personal property taxes that are associated are waived in lieu of this agreement. So I think the proponents are here, the applicants for this particular project. This is the project and property we all kind of think of as the Chesborough property, but there's more than one there, right? There's an abutter that has sold you a piece. Yeah.
Battery homes.
So that's where it will be going. 6.5 megawatts on 31 acres of leased land.
I'm all for it, it's revenue. I like it.
It goes to town meeting. So what you're, in a way, what you're approving is that this text be the text that goes on to, associated with the warrant for town.
They have my support.
As they have mine as well. You don't see any changes that are needed or anything?
I don't.
I would move that we accept the text, or is this,
Place this text on the warrant, I think.
I would move that we place this text on the town meeting warrant.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Deja vu, another pilot.
It is. It was the same template that was proposed. The project proponent in this case took the liberty of marking up the document to great detail. And our town council is currently in India and hasn't had a chance to review the suggested edits. Typically, with these things, I reject all edits like that. It's like, it's town council, it's our agreement. Just agree to the numbers or don't agree at all.
Right.
That's kind of where I am with this. I'd like your permission to continue to take that tack and just reject all of and not put it on the warrant tonight. We can get this done on the 19th. And it also gives the planning board a little bit of opportunity to sort out their issues with this proposal.
So, in essence, this Wallem Lake Road Solar is just larger scale, but almost identical to Douglas Renewables.
The agreement would be similar, yeah.
And the projects are relatively, they're both solar farms.
Yeah, I mean, it's 11.5 megawatts, so it's nearly two times as big, so that's why I hesitate to say it's similar. It's really a lot bigger. It's in a different part of town. It's in a, it'll be more visible to more people, and it's near a lake. I think the planning board, I attended the planning board meeting. I think they have some legal issues they have to work out with council, and I would just recommend that you withhold your action until they are completely satisfied at the planning board level that they're going to move forward.
Yes, sir.
The Wallem Lake has a battery array. Does the renewables one also have a battery array?
I'm not sure. They left.
We didn't get into that level of detail. They showed the transformer pad and
Yeah.
the transformers. I'm not sure if there's a battery array within that building or not, in that building, but
That's a huge difference.
there's a
Especially
lot of
for fire.
differences between the two projects, I look at it from a site development perspective. And,
Right.
the main difference, I think, is the smaller project sheds water in 3 different directions, whereas the Wallem Lake one all goes in one direction. So that's a big difference.
Well, the other big difference is it's roughly twice the size.
It's two
So,
times as much money, and we did agree on the
97,500.
numbers. It would be whatever that came out to, 87, or is it 88,000?
97.5.
97.5 with the 2.5% escalator. From my position of trying to balance the budget, I won't deny that. Just remember how the revenue works. It becomes part of the levy. So it's not an add. You don't have 10 and this gives you 1, now you have 11. You have 10, this gives you 1, now you get 9 from the other taxpayers and 1 from this, you'll still be at 10. It's incorporated into the levy after the first year. In the first year, it's considered new growth. So if and when these agreements are all approved by town meeting and they're in place, the very first year that the payments are made, you will see it on the new growth line in the revenue budget. Thereafter, it goes into the levy. That's why 2.5% was important for us, because it kind of matches everything else we do with the levy, so it flows a little bit easier for us. So that's where we are with it. The two agreements together, 97 and 48.7 is, you know, $147,000.
Yep, 146.2.
So in theory, as just for the folks at home, what you're saying is this would in fact reduce people's taxes a little bit.
Or soften the rate of increase.
I think that's a better way to put it. Tim.
Yeah.
You're just biased.
Well, but that's.
I don't want to get into making promises where people think we're reducing their taxes.
Thank you for protecting me.
That's true of all economic development, though. It's a really important point with all economic development. It gets added to the base after year one. So it has to be of a large enough size to truly offset your obligation as a homeowner for you to really feel it. It's over time, you know, it becomes, you have less of a share of the growth. So it should mollify or should dampen your sense of how fast taxes are going up when you do this.
You're quite a good tap dancer on that. You're doing all right.
It's a tampon.
No, but I mean, we always had this debate. So in a city like Woonsocket, which was going bankrupt, we give people tax incentives, right? 0 in year one. Do your project, fix the building at 0 in year one. Bear in mind, the value of the building was 0 anyway.
Right.
So it was no loss to the tax. People would always complain, oh, it's corporate welfare. Well, no, it's going to feather in and it's going to go to the levy. It's just going to slowly, over time, make the commercial levy bigger, or the base bigger, so that the levy is smaller. And that's how it works. So there's no panacea that, oh, we get this one thing that's going to pay us $1 million a year. That's an extra $1 million the town has to spend. It doesn't work that way. It's $1 million that goes into the levy that is no longer raised from the real property tax base.
You know what it isn't? Extra or found money.
It's
Right, Gene?
definitely not found.
Huh?
You've been saved, I think,
Yeah, that
numerous
whole day
times
he's
in
been
this one conversation, Mr.
And
Bowman.
Gene's smiling.
Right.
That's a good sign. Gene's happy.
But in
All
this
right.
case, I feel bad because I think you should be looking at the actual language, and as of
No.
today, we couldn't get it back from Rich, so.
So we're gonna,
Be it on the next agenda.
yeah, we'll just
Do
park
we need to
this.
vote to authorize you to do anything, or can we just pass it over?
Well, I think you did vote to have me negotiate these, so
Okay.
I think we're all
Then
set.
you're
We're already
good.
covered.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so we're just gonna, I call it a parking lot. We're gonna park agenda item 8 and revisit it on the next meeting,
Yeah.
based on Mr. Bowen successfully getting back from India.
Yeah. Well, what's he doing? He's India, Thailand,
Thailand, India,
Dubai,
all in one
Life
week.
O'Reilly.
Can I ask for a quick 2-minute bio break before we get into the reviewing of the warrant articles?
There are some things you should just never put a stop to.
I'm
If you're at the
stopping.
point where you have to ask,
I have no objection
there is
to
really no
a
reason.
I have no objection to a comfort break.
A comfort break.
The chairman.
So can we pause for 5? Thank you.
the official ones
We're
that go,
good.
that stay
Says
here
draft.
forever.
Okay.
Yes, I'm serious. Don't write on him. Oh, my God.
Please note that Tim Bonin has been chastised.
Carry on.
And appropriately so.
All right, so we're on to
Is official.
item number 9, review of the warrant articles without Tim Bonin writing on the official minutes copy of said warrant article,
I
Under-
gave you the
under fear of penalty from Suzanne Kane.
I gave you the first page. I want you to look at the listing only, not down below the, because we're still working on that. So Jean's here to answer any questions that you might have on any of the items on the proposed items for the 2 warrants, special town meeting and annual town meeting.
Hello, Jean.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Is that chair
I
okay?
have the low chair tonight. I don't like this chair. I missed it.
This, Gene?
Would you like this chair?
I'll use this one for now,
Okay.
thank you.
I don't have
So
any
this is where we
questions.
ask you questions?
You can if
If
you
you have
like.
if you have any questions on any of the items,
How's
I-
that snow and ice look so far?
Snow and ice is in
No,
deficit.
Not good, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're
common.
taking my thunder from my announcements too.
Okay.
Obviously, we're under again. It was a very expensive weekend. So we'll be looking at more like 275 by the time the season is over.
Well, it's like, going under on snow and ice, it's like saying the sun's gonna rise. It happens.
So it's always under budgeted. This year,
Yeah.
we did add money to the budget to try to do a little bit to avoid that. It lasted all this time, and here we are in March and end of February, and it just all went up.
And then Monday, it just laughed at us horribly.
Yeah, it did. I'll tell you what, though, the drain, as big an expenditure as that was, it kind of makes sense, right? 16 inches of snow. The drain is the dribs and drabs, the nights where it ices over for a few hours and it's dangerous to drive, and they go out and they put a couple of runs of salt down. That's what bleeds you dry. But at this point, the barn is empty. We've got to replenish.
I had a question on the increased school transportation. Is that including looking at the bus contract?
No. I don't have a copy.
Is there a
I thought I got
motto
that right
about
from
being
here.
prepared or something?
Well, I wasn't expecting to come to the table at this point.
It's only the town meeting warrant.
Why
We
did
never
you-
want to hear from you on that.
why did you come?
Because I got the look. The look. Bill told me what the look meant.
Don't throw me under the bus.
I see tread marks across you right now, Bill.
I'm actually still deciding on where that 10,000, currently that 10,000 is increased Douglas Public Schools personnel expenses. That would replace that amount of money. I am going to check with the auditors to see if we can put that in the town administrator's budget. I don't know that we can because the expenditure would have already been made prior to the transfer. So currently that's there. The 28,000 for the increase in transportation is solely for sped.
Okay.
That was the notice. The number for the highway maintenance has increased since the printing of this.
Right. And I did
Document.
tell them not to look at that section, didn't
Oh, I'm
I?
sorry. Wait. That is now 20,000. So that's going to be an offset from the decrease of highway wages.
Told them we were still working on it.
And we are correct. We are still working on this.
Who's them?
section.
I didn't recall hearing that. Who's the them?
Watch the meeting.
The increased debt, principal, and interest, that is because of the refunding that we did. We will have to do a couple transfers from the premium from the sale of bonds that we're currently amortizing for the old loan, as well as 3 of the projects that closed out. So we use those funds to help pay the principal on the new refunding. So it's really just a housekeeping item.
Okay.
I'm still waiting to work on building department wages and Board of Health expenses. And the decrease is, my guess is going to be from health insurance, employee benefits. Snow and ice, it depends on where that number comes out. That would be a transfer from free cash. Supplement green communities funding, I put that as a placeholder to see where that project ends up. We may need to fund that fund health insurance equity portion. That's the 1-month working rate that Matt was referring to.
That we would need to open.
This is an equity piece. This is not a monthly premium, so that would have to be paid in this fiscal year because they need the money in place prior to July 1st. So it has to be done at town meeting.
Okay.
And the ambulance purchase, that would be language, we received a $100,000 funding source from the state. We're still waiting to hear the final parameters around that.
We've asked for an extension to spend the
Right.
money. So all the paperwork was initiated, and the contract was sent back to us from the Department of Public Safety. So that is done. They know that we have a claim on the funds and that we want to use them. They originally set a use-by date of June 30th. So this fiscal year, we've asked them to extend that.
It's in December.
So that we have a little bit of wiggle room, whether we want to put it in the capital budget or we want to use another funding source for that purchase.
Got it.
As Suzanne said, Article 2 is really going to be flexible for a little while because, we're still early enough in the process where I have to wait to see. We like to handle any issues that come up at this town meeting. The only other bite at the apple would be the reserve fund transfer. So I like to kind of handle it at the town meeting first. And if it doesn't get handled here, then we would go to the FinCom. But I'm still working with the departments for any problems that we have right now. But that's where we are.
There's also at the top listing, which isn't at the bottom because I haven't done the bottom yet, the supplement for the Cedar Street Bridge project.
Okay. I recall texting the town administrator on that bridge project.
Yes. You did. I'm not entirely sure. Council would advise that we disclose the context. That is a controversial bridge. It's been the subject of.
Yes.
Really not the subject of the litigation, but the subject of the interaction that arose from the bridge. The town received a $500,000 grant to replace or repair that bridge. It is contingent upon some investigation of the abutments, which we have no reason to believe are in any kind of shape at all. So there may be some town funds that need to go to finishing the project properly. So that's there. On the green communities, I think we're going to close exactly as we predicted, actually a little bit ahead of where we predicted. Because the reimbursements that came after, so the project had to be accepted before the reimbursement could come from MAPC and from National Grid. And so we're still awaiting those. So we should close.
And you had one more invoice I was waiting for, correct?
Oh, yes, from the audit firm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're in good shape.
So we put these as placeholders, again, mostly for our benefit. If we need to remove them, it's better to have them there than to forget about them.
I'm sure we'll be discussing these in much greater detail as we move along.
Yeah.
Yes, you will.
That's a pretty good introduction.
It does. Looks good. I don't have any other
Is
questions.
that the STM? What's on the ATM?
A lot of stuff.
Yeah. A lot of these things are typical, though.
Let's start looking through these for the worst possible ones to have to present and give those to Hughes now.
Probably should do
Right.
that.
Yes.
Number 17.
Do we have any idea of which are the longest ones to read? Because that would affect our decision. As to who-
All the zoning changes.
Yeah, I only speak to the financial ones, which are pretty straightforward and reoccurring, so I'll let Bill
And
speak
again,
to the
these are,
others.
everything that I've been
Road
told is a
acceptance.
placeholder. There might be some coming off.
Oh, so that way he's stuck having to stay for the whole thing, yeah. I say we give all 24 to Hughes.
Second.
You notice I'm not writing anything down.
Mike Hughes to present on behalf of BOS at,
It's not an item on the agenda, so.
Oh, wow.
Agenda's very fluid.
Meetings,
We want to talk about the agenda?
flashing that legal knowledge around.
I really don't think it would be fair to leave Hal out of this either, come to think of it.
You know what? Hal didn't, we kind of figured it's winter. Hal's down in Florida.
First part of every month, apparently.
Hughes tried that like last minute, watch this. He's gonna pay for it. I really don't have any questions on any of
I
it.
don't.
Do you, Tim?
At this time, no.
But we reserve the right to have questions later.
That is fine.
And make assignments.
I encourage the questions.
So we also encourage questions do not include the term found anything. Other than I've found Hughes to have to read off painful articles at town meeting.
This is the sound of me not saying anything.
I
Gene.
appreciate that. And Tim will never say anything anymore.
He will, he'll just say it quietly.
It's not on camera.
All right, thank you, Gene.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go to release executive session minutes and possible votes.
Yes, every year I try to have you release the executive session minutes that were approved and not released. I actually had, most of them that were here were, seemed to be personnel type issues or contract negotiations. So the ones that I did have Labor Council review these, and that's his little memo in the front. And we are going to release all of those that are contract negotiations. Anything that was personnel is still going to remain and will probably remain forever.
Okay.
Okay? So the list that you have is what I would like you to release. So the motion can be as presented.
Before we do that, I see some of these are marked do not release.
That's that's for my purposes. In when you first approve them,
Okay.
you approve them and say do not release. So there's a lot of times there's multiple items on the agenda or on the executive session minutes, 8A, 8B, 8C. So for each one, I will put, for the whole thing, do not release. And then as you release each individual item, then I have the date for that item
I
that
see.
it's released.
So our motion here would be to release all of them in this list, is that
Right.
correct? Okay. I would move to release the executive session minutes as contained in the list, page 1 and page 2 in our book.
I'll second.
You got something?
I was just
I was gonna
quiet some thought.
give a shout out to Julian Assange, but we're good.
All right.
Free and transparent and open.
Wherever he may be.
Thing.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I am skipping over item number 11.
Oh,
Should I not? It's the minutes.
I know, I forgot.
How many are back due?
How many are what?
How many?
I think it's just the previous meeting, and I don't think you
It's
have a
just the
quorum.
one, it's February 19th.
Yeah.
It's a different
Only-
makeup of the
only
board again.
Selectman Cortez was here for that.
Yep.
So,
Skip.
do it.
So I'm skipping it. Brings us to your report, Mr. Wojcik.
I'll be brief. We got correspondence today from His Excellency the Governor indicating that the town will receive $364,848 in Chapter 90 funds for fiscal 20. The rest of our work, we've been battling between lack of quorums and snow events. All of our capital improvement and FinCom and other activities are behind schedule. And we're also working against any number of uncertainties that are tied to 6-digit numbers. It's very difficult to present the budget when there's all that uncertainty. When I talk about health insurance being a $272,000 swing, there are other items of a similar magnitude. I expect them to be resolved to the point where we can publish a budget very shortly, within a week or two. So we are presenting as much as we can to FinCom of those things that we don't think will change very much. But it's not going to get you to a solid understanding of the bottom line just yet, because those pieces are still in play. So my apologies to some extent, but there are a lot of events here that are totally out of our control.
You have nothing to apologize for.
Exactly. Well, we like to be timely and transparent. I think I've already hinted in a number of different fora that this year is a good year, we're in good shape, there are good grant opportunities, there are cost savings initiatives that have been pursued to conclusion, so I think we're looking at a solid budget year. And sometimes it takes more time to deliver good news than bad. That was all I had, Mr. Chairman. That is what we've been toiling against for the last 2 weeks.
FinCom is how far behind?
Well, is it 2 extra meetings that they've scheduled?
They've only met with the police so far. They have a pretty heavy agenda. Next week, they have a highway, Douglas Public Schools for the second time, this one with the budget discussion and BBT. And then they'll be meeting weekly up until April 10th. The public hearing will be April 10th.
On the school choice in out front, where in the black there?
In a better position than last year.
Great.
There's been an improvement.
BVT is about the same?
No, it's down quite a bit. So I think in the grand scheme it was up 9%,
yeah.
which is better than 26 or whatever it was last year. By a lot.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
he'll be on at 8:30 on Tuesday night if you want to tune in.
8:30, we're back and forth. The chair wants him there for 8, but I just don't foresee the Douglas Public Schools finishing their
In a
presentation.
half hour.
I will pass.
Dr. Fitzpatrick.
His presentation does not change. He's going to tell you how many boards and finance committees, and the numbers should be up into the thousands by now. So, as entertaining and bright as the man is, I think I will pass on going to partake in his presentation this year.
We will be there with bells on.
I will not.
Oh, no! Oh.
You'll be there with bells on.
I'm
The
coming back.
volleyball named Wilson.
I'm coming back from my 2-day conference at UMass to stay certified, so I won't be at that meeting.
Excellent. All right, so do we have any old business? None. Do we have any new business? Seeing as none again, I would be looking for one of your very fancy motions, Mr. Bonin.
Okay, well, I would like to make a motion that we move from this session to executive session for the purposes of discussing contract negotiations, and then to leave the executive session for the purpose of adjournment.
I would second that well-crafted motion.
Was made and seconded. Roll call vote.
Vote and aye.
Kevin Morris, aye.
Dave Cortez, aye.